Hello, everybody, and good morning. This is Ed from The Morning Goals. I hope you guys had a great 4th of July weekend, and welcome to this episode. I respectfully disagree. So, I know this for a fact. All of us, whether when we were young kids or in college or as adults or at work, we've always gotten into an argument or a fight that sort of escalated. It started with one comment and then another comment, and then it escalates, and all of a sudden you're maybe yelling at each other, you're talking about other things, and it sort of keeps escalating and snowballing, and then all of a sudden you don't remember why you got into that argument. I think we've all been there. So that's one sort of thing to think about. The second thing to think about today is what's happening politically. Now, I try not to get too political, even though I'm politically involved, because we are at a situation or a point in our country where people are no longer speaking with each other. They're no longer discussing issues, and they're not agreeing to disagree. So today's topic in our theme of turning negatives into positives is I respectfully disagree. Now, we have friends, and we've seen this over the last 4-8 years in the political spectrum, but also probably in our professional lives or personal lives. We've seen us get to a point where we can't actually share our ideas because everybody has to be right. We're watching the same thing. Your opinion is different than my opinion, or your interpretation is different than my interpretation. And all of a sudden, we're headbutting, and we are on two very different pages. Now, when I was growing up, we could have those discussions and be like, I agree to disagree, or I respectfully disagree. That's how I feel. That's how you feel, and that's okay. Now it seems like everybody has to be right. And we've seen this for professional lives, our personal lives, our political arena. Everybody has to be right. So this episode is a reminder that it is okay to disagree, put a cap on it, and move on, right? So a couple of things. So I'm going to start with a quote today. When we agree to disagree, we honor the relationship above trying to change the person. So when we agree to disagree, we honor the relationship above trying to change the person. That's from wisdomhunters.com. If those of you who watch the news on a regular basis, a few years ago, there was a picture of Michelle Obama sitting next to George W. Bush at a baseball game. And in that picture, they're laughing, they're giggling, and Ellen, I think, was even there and said she had a relationship with George W. Bush. Now, if you know any of these people, they are polar opposites on the political spectrum. And both Michelle Obama and Ellen had gotten some flack. How dare you be friends with this guy? He killed people, and he may have, and he did, and there were wars and stuff because of him. But there was a relationship between them that they had formed at events, at inaugurations, etc. And Michelle Obama is now known to be a friend of George W. Bush. And if we think of this quote, when we agree to disagree, we honor the relationship above trying to change the person. So as friends or as acquaintances, there's underlying principles that bind us together. In families, there's blood that binds us together, and you may not agree with everybody in your family. But when you agree with people and you disagree with them, most importantly, you're honoring that relationship. And I use that example, that polar opposite of Michelle Obama and George W. Bush. It is such a potent image, but also a very polar opposite. And how can people with such different backgrounds, such different philosophies actually maintain a relationship? And that's important. So as we think about in the last few weeks turning negatives into positives, or negative into positives, we want to consider these situations that we're in. At work, you might be told by your boss or somebody superior to you in the hierarchy of work life to do something that you don't agree with. So most importantly, and we talked about this last week, is open communication. make sure you're telling them that I don't actually agree with this and this is why. You don't have to get in a fight. You don't have to be emotional about it, but stating how you feel and why you feel that way may be a way for them to think about it differently, but know at least where you stand. Getting into a fighting match and then forgetting why you got into that fight, or that fight escalates forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, and nobody is actually talking to each other. You're talking at each other. You are arguing and you're not discussing. That is very common when you don't agree to disagree. So those are some general things to kind of think about as we encounter people in our lives that we're not going to agree with. Sometimes in a relationship, you might encounter a partner where you might agree to disagree on a lot of things. You might disagree on the philosophy of raising your kids, or how you save money, or retirement, right? But we can agree to disagree, but we don't need to be disagreeable. That's another quote of today. We don't need to be disagreeable. We don't need to fight. We don't need to argue, and we don't need to let it escalate. And that's a quote from John Wooden. So what are some ways to disagree respectfully? And I got this from kidshealth.org. So think about this. We're telling kids that it's okay to agree to disagree, and I'm giving you this advice, and most of the people watching are adults, right? So this is important for us as well, because we are all on a regular basis encountering people that we disagree with. So number one, don't make it personal. That's very hard. I think we talked about last week about open communication and how not making things personal is so important, but it's true. Try not to make this disagreement personal, right? You're calling people names, telling people that they're wrong. That's negative. Avoid putting down the other person's ideas and beliefs. That's number two. Now, this is very common nowadays, right? People think they're better than other people. People think they're smarter than other people. And when you do this and you put down somebody else's beliefs, there is a natural you have a reactionary response. People react to that negativity. So honoring them and giving them space. We talk about this a lot in coaching and therapy, even out in the real world. We say give people space so that they can share their ideas. They may not know what things are. They know they have their knowledge. And I have two examples here. When I was young and in Texas, I was working on a political campaign, and a judge of the opposite party pulled me aside and took me out for dinner. And she goes, "Ed, I know you believe these things that you believe because that's how you were raised and that's what you were exposed to. And that's okay. And I was raised differently, and I believe these things, and that was my exposure, and that's okay too. But we can still be friends." And I remember that conversation. I remember where we were sitting. I remember how we were dressed, because she was completely right. A lot of us are the products of how we were raised, what we are exposed to. And if somebody puts down where I'm from, or how I was raised, or my religion, all of a sudden we shut people down who don't want to actually then engage with us. So that was one example. The second example of putting other people down was that I come from a very large family. Some of us are very educated, and some of us aren't very educated, but education does not mean smart or stupid. It doesn't mean, dumb, right? And so we just have different core beliefs, because this is sort of the lens that we're looking through, right? And so I try to honor everybody's opinion in my family, even though sometimes they're hurtful to me. I let them know. I was in a situation this weekend where I let somebody know that what she was doing was hurtful to me, even though she thinks she was right. And she may be right, I might be wrong, but I felt that it was hurtful. She listened to me. Now, is she going to stop doing what she's doing? I'm not sure, but she might. But at least she now knows how I feel and how she makes me feel when she does the things that she does. So the lens that people look through, and we don't always know that, right? So I use both of those examples that I gave you just now is with my family. I know where they come from. I've been exposed to them. I know them on a very intimate and personal level. For a lot of people you encounter either at work or in the real world, shopping or doing transactions, you may not know that lens that they come from. You don't know what they're going through. And so giving them space and just listening, active listening, we talk about that, and not putting down their beliefs is important because you actually don't know where they come from. Number 3 is use I statements. We learned about that in open communication last week, but in this disagreement or agreeing to disagree, talk about how you feel, what you think, and don't put words in the other person's mouth, right? That's so important, not to put words in the other person's mouth. You are in control of how you feel. You're in control of what you think. And you are in control of what you say. So use I statements when you're interacting with somebody you don't agree with. Listen to the other point of view. So I mentioned active listening, and that is so important, right? So we don't want to cut people off. I am guilty of this from time to time. I've worked really hard to be comfortable in silence so that I could let the other person finish and let the other person share their thoughts. My partner very early on used to say, if you're talking, you're not listening. And now don't say that to somebody because that may get a negative reaction. But think about it, right? If you're talking, you're not listening. And if they're talking, they may feel or what that they're saying is something very important to them, right? So give them that space. And lastly, and guys, this is the hardest one possible for me. Stay calm. I opened up this discussion with the imagery of us getting into an argument or a discussion and escalating and turning into a yelling match and continuing and forging ahead. And then all of a sudden, nobody understands why they started arguing and it was all convoluted and everybody leaves angry, right? That's how I started. Stay calm, right? Do your PQ reps, your tapping method, something to stay calm and stay grounded. And now, to reiterate, this is literally from a Kids Health website. Don't make it personal. Avoid putting the other person's beliefs or thoughts down. Use I statements. Listen to the other point of view and stay calm. We can learn a lot from kids, guys. And so that is so important. Lastly, I want to sort of finish today on how to disagree. Now, there's very direct ways to disagree, right? You can say, I don't agree with that. That's not right. But if you say that's not right, you're saying you're right and they're wrong. So that ends the discussion. You can say, I see things differently, right? So I'm listening to you. I hear what you say. I'm acknowledging what you've said, but I see things differently. I'm afraid I can't agree with you. I statements. I'm afraid I can't agree with you. That's a good point, but right, giving them a win and then sort of rebutting that win. I don't think so, and I doubt it. Those are statements that sort of end and shut down the discussion, right? So think about when you're using I statements that you're either one, talking about your feelings, so I'm afraid I can't agree with you, or acknowledging that we're on a different playing field. I see things differently. That's a good point, but and try not to sort of shut the other person down. Now, of course, what's going to happen this week, you're going to find somebody who you disagree with. It's going to start to escalate, and you're going to take a step back and be calm, right? So I'm going to end with a quote from marriage.com. So marriage, right? All of this stuff that I've talked about agreeing to disagree, you will encounter in your relationships. Okay. Sometimes you will just have to learn to agree to disagree. Every fight or argument doesn't need to end with you're right or you're wrong. Every fight or argument doesn't need to end with you're right or you are wrong, right? Because we're all winners and we all have valid opinions and things. It's okay to have different opinions, different value systems, and listening to the other person. So everybody, I hope you guys have a great Thursday. I'm super excited for the weekend. It is hot here. Remember, you can always visit me at themorninggoals.com. And I guarantee you're going to encounter a situation this week. It always happens that you're going to have to agree to disagree. So everybody, thank you very much and have a blessed Thursday.